Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on coding in the 4Cs. My name is Christine, and I will be your moderator today. I am so excited to have everyone here with us, and we have an absolutely phenomenal lineup for you, so it's going to be really great. But before we get started, as always, we have a couple of housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded, so don't worry about that. We will be sending this around within 24 hours, even if you have to drop off anytime. No need to worry about that. If you have any technical difficulties, please enter them in the Q&A part of your panel. We have somebody who will be right there to help you out, to try and work it out, no worries. And if you are really having a lot of difficulty, there's nothing like the tried and true method of turning it off and on again. That usually gets the bugs out. Speaking of questions, we will be reserving some time for audience questions to get those in. So make sure you put those in the Q&A section of your platform. This is a rather unique webinar. Most webinars are usually an hour long. This one is divided into two sections. The first hour will feature presentations and a discussion of coding in the 4Cs. You'll hear from some amazing panelists, and I'm going to introduce them in a second, so hang tight. And the second hour is going to be a deeper dive into the brand spanking new code kit that littleBits just launched today, actually, and you're going to hear from the lead product designer as well as several educators who've been using it with their students. There's so much good stuff, we really couldn't fit it into just an hour, but we realize that is a long time. So we encourage you to join for whatever parts that you can. Even if you have to jump out and jump back in again, we'll be here until 3. And again, this is being recorded, so if you miss anything, you can always catch up. But to that end, we will be giving away 2 code kits during today's webinar, one at the end of each hour. So one at 2 o'clock Eastern time and one at 3 o'clock Eastern time. So we really highly encourage you to stick around for that. Enough with the housekeeping stuff and on to the good stuff. I'm really happy to introduce our panelists for this first session. First up, we have Ayah Bdeir, who is the founder and CEO of littleBits. littleBits is an award-winning platform of easy-to-use electronic building blocks and is empowering kids everywhere to create inventions, large and small. Bdeir is an engineer, interactive artist, and one of the leaders of the open source hardware movement. Bdeir's career in education has centered on advancing open source hardware to make education and innovation more accessible to people around the world. After Ayah, we're going to have Mimi Ito. We're really excited to have Mimi with us here today. She is a cultural anthropologist and educator who studies how new media can fuel learning, creativity, and digital citizenship for young people. She is the director of the Connected Learning Lab at the University of California, Irvine, and co-founder of Connected Camps, a nonprofit that offers fun, hands-on online STEM summer camps and after-school programs for kids. And we'll round out this first session with Allyssa Loya. Allyssa is a library media specialist at Doris Jones Elementary in Rockwall, Texas. She has 2 kids and is married to a wonderfully nerdy IT manager, and his love of IT and tech has rubbed off in the library. So we'll hear from her about how things are going in her library with coding and the 4Cs. So with that, we're going to get started. I'm going to pass it over to Ayah and welcome everybody.
Hi, everyone. This is Ayah, as Christine said. First, I wanted to welcome all of you for joining us. I'm really grateful for the time that you're going to give us today. Hopefully, we'll talk about things that are important to you, and you'll hear our excitement about the topics at hand, coding and the 4Cs in particular. I want to start by thanking Allyssa and Mimi for joining us. We consider really pioneers in their field. They're on the ground doing the work that we all aspire to be doing, and they're doing such incredible work both in school and after school and in libraries, which is, as we know, a very fully rounded experience to be able to really surround kids with the education that we want. So I'm really grateful for their being here. I'm going to start by telling you a bit about my background and how things started, and what are the principles behind littleBits, and hopefully, be able to have some good question answers afterwards. So as Christine said, my name is Ayah Bdeir. I'm the founder and CEO of littleBits, and I'm not self-centered from having put my own picture in here, but I'm also realizing that you don't have a visual, and it's really important to remember that behind a lot of the things that we do, there are people that are trying to really make the world a better place. And so I'm the founder of littleBits. I started a little over 5 years ago. We are based in New York. And I want to come out and say it straight out, I am not an educator. And at littleBits, most of us are not educators, and we don't profess to know better than our educators. And in fact, we have a tremendous amount of respect for our educators. All we profess to do is try to create tools that are empowering to you and empowering to your students, so that we can make this next generation more capable of taking on 21st century challenges. My background, like I said, is in engineering. I learned how to code when I first started my undergrad, where I grew up in Beirut, and I had a really horrible time learning how to code. It was a very dry experience, very top down. It was very much about memorizing syntax and sort of following algorithms and text that is written on sheets of paper. It wasn't an all empowering experience. And so I draw on a lot of that experience when we start to think about how to teach the next generation coding, so that we can learn from those mistakes and do it differently and really provide a fresh perspective. So first things first, what is littleBits? We are a platform of easy to use electronic building blocks. What this means is that they are individual bits. These are electrical circuits that are pre-engineered and pre-assembled and color-coded, so that you don't have to have any experience in engineering whatsoever, but you can very quickly snap a few bits together and get started creating your electronic inventions. They span a variety from very simple to very complex. Some are lights and sounds and sensors, and some are more complex, like cloud connectivity, Bluetooth connectivity, programmability, and really range all the range in between. Our goal is to enable kids and adults alike to be able to snap two bits together using the magnets so that they can't put things the wrong way, and very, very quickly see a light come on, see a motor moving, and from there start to construct things that are more complex, that have more behavior, that have more programmability, that have more wireless control, and really feel empowered by the technology that they were just able to create themselves. I want to start today by referencing a statistic that some of you may have seen. This one comes from the US Department of Labor a few years ago, and I've heard varying different numbers around the same topic. 65% of today's students will have careers that don't exist yet. This is a staggering number. It is shocking on one hand, but at the same time, I'm almost not surprised. I wasn't surprised when I first heard it. When I grew up, there was no course to be a data scientist. I couldn't study to be a UX researcher. We have now some of the most in-demand jobs. Front-end development didn't even exist when I was studying to decide what I wanted to do. So, just drawing from my experience, I can see how that's the case, and even more with the students of today. So if 65% of today's students will have careers that don't exist yet, then we have to think differently about how we prepare them for careers of the future that we may or may not know about. One thing that is very inspiring to us at littleBits is to look at some of the biggest movers and shakers and innovators in the world, and try to sort of interpolate and extrapolate what it took to really put them on their path. You are all familiar with the person that we see here, Elon Musk. He's the founder of SpaceX, Tesla, and PayPal. He studied physics, economics, and material science, but most importantly, I think the biggest kind of insight about Elon Musk is that he taught himself programming at age 10 because he wanted to create his own video games. It was a need that he had. It wasn't something that he thought was going to be a career, but he taught himself to program in order to achieve it, and has gone on to become the person that he is. Another person that we're also inspired by is the founder of Amazon. He also studied in STEM, studied electrical engineering and computer science, but in his case, he got on this path not because he wanted a specific career, but he wanted to keep his siblings out of his room, and so he created an electric alarm to do that. Surprisingly, we found that this is one of the most popular applications of electronics that kids have. very real problem for them. They want to keep their sibling out of their room. And in this case, it set this inventor out on a path to use technology for creative purposes. And finally, Sheryl Sandberg, who's not a technologist herself, not in the traditional sense of the word at least. She studied management and economics. She's the CEO of Facebook. She runs the biggest social network in the world and has a tremendous amount of influence in the technology that she creates. But she started on her path learning in research, studying leprosy, and studying blindness. And so they're very sort of humanities-focused efforts that got her started. And so as we think about the world that we're sort of preparing students to embark on, it's the 21st century presents very new problems. Some of them that we're creating, some of them we're inheriting, very new problems. But those new problems require new skills and demand new careers. Most importantly, demand people that are able to adapt to these new careers as they emerge. And so, you know, one of the obvious things that you are, I'm sure have all heard is this craze around learning how to code being the most important thing. Creating more and more software developers and being able to create more software developers. But the Bureau of Labor Statistics tells us that actually computer programs in particular, demand for them is going to decline over the next few years. So it's not really about creating software developers and programmers, but it's really around a bigger idea of teaching computational thinking and coding for other purposes. Where does coding fit in if that's the case? If we're going to see programming jobs decline, and what is the place of programming? Wired a few months ago wrote this big article that caused quite a bit of stir. The next blue collar job is coding, and so that's kind of one perspective on, you know, we're going to be outsourcing more of this to algorithms and machines, and so maybe it's not the end all be all that we think it is. We think coding skills are not just for programmers. There is so much more that you can benefit from learning how to code. Information technology hugely leverages code. Data analysts use code at the heart of everything they do. Artists, designers that are using computational thinking to use new tools, create tools, and create their own designs and art in various new ways. Engineers, of course, and scientists, and so many more professions that are using coding at the heart of what they do. So if we really want to kind of take this on and really embark on preparing students for the 21st century and be able to inspire innovation, we need to create the next generation inventors, critical thinkers, collaborative creators, and lifelong learners. Lifelong learners being the key word here, because things will emerge, new topics, new subjects, new skills required. So we want to prepare students to really be able to learn anything that comes their way. So we want to start with an insight, you know, to how do we prepare students for the 21st century? We start by looking at what students are doing, what kids are doing. According to Common Sense Media, 97% of kids' time is spent consuming media. That is a shocking statistic as well. That means only 3% of their time is spent being creative. So there's a huge opportunity here. There's a huge opportunity to be able to affect change and really use this breakdown. So going back to our mission and kind of the role that we play, I don't want to kind of sound preachy. I'll just tell you sort of our experience and our point of view and how we are trying to create a difference. Our mission is to empower kids to create inventions. The word create inventions are very deliberate. It's around invention and innovation, yes, but it's not about enabling kids to replicate or create what's out there or recreate what's out there. It's about them creating. So creativity is really at the heart of this. And the way we do that is we create this sort of tool that is really expansive so that they can do whatever they want with it. It's not a puzzle. It's not a one-guided experience. It's really an open-ended platform that they can create with, so that they can really have limitless possibilities ahead of them, whether they want to make bubble blowers, whether they want to make sibling alarms, whether they want to keep their brothers and sisters out of the room. You know, you can think of any application using one platform. So let's go back to the original question at hand. How do we prepare students for the 21st century? And again, I'll tell you what our opinion is, and obviously there are many different methods, and our panelists today have varying sort of perspectives on that. So we'll tell you sort of how we think about it. The first thing we like to do in order to prepare students for the 21st century is prioritizing the 4 C's. As you know, the 4 C's are creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, and communication. This sort of sentence has been starting to get more traction, which we're excited about, and combines words that we really believe in: creativity, critical thinking, communication, and collaboration. But I'm going to zero in on only sort of a subset of this aspect, creativity in particular. I shared the statistic on kids spending 3% of their time being creative, but at the same time, if you look at the Future of Jobs report by the World Economic Forum, creativity in 2015, if you look at the top 10 skills required to be successful in 2015, creativity was number 10. In 2020, it's expected to jump to number 2. It is the biggest jump that we see in any of the skills required. So how can we accept that kids are spending only 3% of their time being creative when we have this huge requirement for them to be creative in 2020 when they're going to be around? So an example of how we put this into practice, as Christine mentioned, today is a special day for us. We launched the littleBits Code Kit. It's our second kit that is focused on education. It is made for educators, with educators. Was a huge collaboration. We wanted to tackle the problem of teaching kids how to code, but we wanted to do it in a way that is different and that is meaningful, and most importantly, that is genuinely educational. So at the heart of the code kit that we launched is what we call the littleBits invention cycle. And really what it is a simplified version of the scientific method or the engineering method or the design thinking method. It's about creating, playing, remixing, and then sharing. So at the start of it, it's about creativity. Just make something, create something that is new or recreated, then play with it and really have fun with it. Then remix it, and that's where a lot of education comes in, where you're starting to ask questions, you're starting to go off book and remixing, and then finally share, because as we said, collaboration and communication are huge parts of what we're sort of really espousing. So an example of how this plays in a real setting, our littleBits coding kit, the sort of big thought there is build games, learn how to code. And so what we're using as hooks for kids to learn how to code are games that they love. Tug of War, Ultimate Shootout, Hot Potato of Doom. It's games that they're enjoying in their real life anyway. It's games that they have been playing and people have been playing for centuries. We inject coding sort of methods and coding principles in them so that they really kind of absorb them in a new way. These are some examples that you see of our lead educator program. We seeded the littleBits Code Kit with our lead educator programs, and you see the teachers really perceiving these moments of invention and moments of creativity and sharing them, and really sort of feeling that the energy that kids are getting from this creative process is basically propelling them through the entire education experience. This is another also insight that testimonial that we got from one of our educators. Rainbows was a favorite remix. So you know, it's frivolous, it's fun, it's not necessarily functional, but kids love it, and they're able to really apply their creativity in how they're working with these things. Then the next sort of bucket in how we consider important to prepare students for the 21st century is making coding fun. So I mentioned this briefly, but our code kit is really using building games as a hook to get kids to learn how to code. And this is something that comes from this quote that you see here from Seymour Papert, the father of learning through play, that really basically says that every maker of video games, that I'm paraphrasing here, but makers of video games use fun as a way to hook kids in, but they never espouse their games being easy. And yet we're always so concerned about making school easy. But in fact, you can make it hard, but as long as it's not boring. That's something that we really believe and we've adapted. So, you know, very clearly, games are fun. We love playing them, we love making them, we love creating them, and kids love inventing new games. It's something that they do very naturally. So this is, you see a hot potato of doom as an example in a classroom where kids are really kind of enjoying what they're doing. And the most beautiful thing is that obviously we don't want them to skip recess because recess is so important. But basically students are saying that they're having so much fun, they would rather skip recess. So, you know, we don't need to hammer them on the head. We don't need to force them to learn. We'll really create something fun, and then, you know, they will come. And they will rock out, and they will want to share what they've made, and that's something that's extremely empowering. Next up, how we prepare students for the 21st century, we believe it's very important to help them make it theirs. This is not just about a technology or education experiences that are just imposed. This is about them really making it their own and making it special, so that they feel really invested in what they're learning. And so we really like to avoid saying this is going to be useful for your future, because we think that they will gloss over it, and you know, they're not necessarily going to be excited. Why should a kid care about learning what a variable is? They won't care about it unless there's something meaningful to them. So if you're going back to the Jeff Bezos example, he wants to create an alarm to keep his siblings out of his room, then he will want to learn what a variable is, because it will help him in his goal to create this sibling alarm. Also, super important, like I said in the beginning, we have no delusion or arrogance in saying that we know how education should work. We are merely there to create tools to empower our educators. So the tools are technology tools, but the tools are also content tools. We want to enable teachers and educators to become coding heroes for their schools, so that they can be the ones that are spearheading these sort of new ideas into their schools. But we can't profess to do that without equipping them with the material that they need. So the material is about really kind of a gradual, low floor, high ceiling, wide wall expression, which is not mine. It's an expression from Mitch Resnick, the founder of Lifelong Kindergarten Group, who is a huge inspiration for us as well. And wide walls is key. So it's about STEAM, not STEM. It's anything from science to humanities to art. If you think back at Sheryl Sandberg, she came to technology from humanities. So it's important to be able to incorporate that and be able to not forget art as a really prime source of creativity and vehicle for creativity is also really important. Some examples of resources that we are creating are our intro lessons, our debugging lessons, tutorial videos, implementation checklists. So this is not about imposing on our educators something new that they have to learn and figure out how to integrate. You know, we believe that it's better for designers and technology makers to provide tools to make it easy, so that everything's out of the box and you don't have to kind of really guess your way. You already have the hardest job in the world to educate our next generation, and so our job is not to make that harder. You know, some of these resources you see are, you know, really breaking down different things that the students can learn using block programming, which is adapting Google's Blockly, which has become very popular in schools, obviously inspired by Scratch, but in this sense, it's a bigger platform, and really wanting to leverage what's out there and not just pretend that we're creating our own. And then finally, and this is one of my favorite points, we believe it's really important to prepare students for the 21st century by making it accessible. Accessible means, on one hand, easy to use, so that it's not just for elites, it's not only for the educated, it's not only for people that have financial resources, not only for people that have education, background in engineering and coding. It's accessible to everybody, but it's also about access across various different parts of society. We have used to be a secret and now not so secret anymore mission at littleBits, which is to get more girls excited about STEM and STEAM. And we believe creating more tools to enable more gender parity and more empowerment for outside the choir and kids that didn't think of themselves as interested in technology is really important. So girls, we believe, have been underserved in terms of tools to be able to get them excited about coding, and also in the language that we use, that societies used and applications. We believe they don't speak enough to girls, so we're trying to remedy that. But we're also trying to reach outside the choir in various other ways. So this is around students that maybe are at risk, or students that didn't think of themselves are interested in STEM and STEAM, really trying to think differently and not just sort of recreating the status quo over and over. So these are some examples of our community, our students playing together across ages, across genders, across backgrounds, across interests, and this collaboration, going back to the 4Cs, is extremely powerful in wanting them to feel part of a group and a community and wanting to share more. And I think we'll hear more about that from Mimi, who obviously is an expert in creating these kinds of communities. So coding educators, we don't need to, preach. You are all doing this already. You're doing this in your classrooms, in your libraries, in your after-school programs. Coding educators are of all ages, of all backgrounds, of all genders, of all walks of life, and that's making for better and even richer experiences, and really inspiring our next generation to really want to feel represented. And so with that, I will say, I'd like to say again how humbled we are to be able to play in the education space. We are merely a tool and a vehicle to help. And we hope that our perspective enables a new way of thinking and in a way that is empowering. But we're also looking for your feedback, good or bad. We're looking for your questions, and we're very happy to help think about things differently if you have these ideas. So thank you again for coming, and thank you again for virtually coming, and thank you again for the work that you do. Looking forward to more discussion later.
Ayah, thank you so much. That was really wonderful. We're going to pass it over to Mimi right now. As a reminder, this is being recorded, so don't worry about that. And we are reserving some time for Q&A at the end, so make sure that you get your questions in. And so we are going to pass the baton over to Mimi in 1 second. Great, Mimi, we can see your screen. We're all ready to go.
Okay, great. Well, I'm delighted to be here, and I love being able to follow Ayah's presentation, which did such a great setup to some of the things that I wanted to talk about, and that are part of Ayah and my shared interests. I feel like littleBits and the work that the team and I have been doing at littleBits is so much in line with a broader community that I've been involved in for many years that we describe as sort of the movement for connected learning. So I'd like to spend the time I have here with all of you to just really pick up on what Ayah was describing about some of the issues around inclusivity in coding, framing up some of the challenges we face about broadening kids' access to coding, about sparking interest in coding for kids who might not already have an interest in coding, and then talk about how work like what Ayah's doing at littleBits and some other folks that Ayah's already referenced, like the Scratch community, some of the projects I've been involved in have been taking really a very complementary set of approaches to addressing this question of broadening kids' access and interest in coding. So I'll start a little bit just quickly framing up some of the challenges. And if I know many of you are probably STEM educators and encounter this every day in your classroom, but clearly not all kids are interested in coding today or interested in engineering today. They don't necessarily see themselves as programmers and engineers. And especially coding, I think, suffers a lot from certain very persistent stereotypes that are, reproduced in the media and just in our everyday lives about coding being a very kind of technical, mathematical, kind of activity that is really about programming for programming's sake, typing madly into a terminal, and that it's also, I think, often perceived as an activity that is tied to a particular kind of cultural and social identity. The nerdy stereotype of the computer coder is something that is still, even in this day and age when I think what Ayah was arguing was that computational thinking, the ability to think algorithmically, to all of these things are, fundamental literacies that are not specific to technical fields anymore. It's not that you have to be a programmer or a tech person to learn to code, but it's a lot like, financial and, traditional literacies. Like, it's not that every kid is going to become, somebody in the tech sector, a programmer, or so on. Just like not every kid is going to become an accountant or CFO, but it is a more, pervasive and fundamental set of skills, orientations, ways of thinking, collaborative skills that kids need to learn. And the degree to which coding is still associated with this kind of nerdy, slightly antisocial stereotype of a math and tech kid, the harder it is for us to expand young people's imagination of what it takes to be a coder. So that's a little bit about the challenge. I found it really interesting that, with the littleBits Code Kit too, that the question of, so how do we design tools, how do we design programs that really start challenging these stereotypes, that encourage multiple and different kinds of pathways into coding. And I thought the focus on gaming was actually quite inspired, and in part because I do a lot of work on game-based learning, so I loved that littleBits was also taking that approach to getting kids into coding. And just very quickly on why gaming is such an important opportunity space, gaming or playful learning, game-based learning, is just the fact that, gaming really is the dominant entertainment medium of our time. Many years ago, gaming surpassed the movie industry in terms of revenue. Virtually all teenagers are gamers. And it's also the thing that's often surprising to people. It's actually fairly, there isn't a gender bias anymore in terms of, who plays video games. So women and men, the ESA puts out these statistics every year, and it tends to hover, at 45 or more % of gamers being female. Now, the kinds of games that girls play are different than the games that boys play, but gaming is definitely sort of an interest area and part of the social lives of girls these days. So it is an interesting opportunity space, not only because kids think of gaming and the culture of gaming as something fun and interest-driven, interactive, hands-on, all of these sort of positive connotations in terms of engagement, but also because gaming is more and more a sort of platform or a set of genres that are more inclusive, not only across gender, but also across, socioeconomic and racial and ethnic divisions, that it really has become a very pervasive medium, and one that, one of the reasons why a lot of the folks in our network look at game-based learning is because we see it as a real opportunity space to meet kids where they are, not only in terms of their authentic interests and identities, but also in sort of a few steps towards a more, interactive, engaged form of stance to media that takes the first steps towards crossing that divide from consumption to production that Ayah laid out so nicely. So when we think about, meeting kids where they are, about building on their existing social engagements and interests, the model we use is what we call connected learning. And, in a nutshell, connected learning really is about trying to find that sweet spot where young people are doing something that they are genuinely interested in. And by interest, we construe that fairly broadly. So there are some kids who just have a passionate interest in something, but for a lot of kids, interest means relevance. It means being able to connect to your community. It means it being tied to your culture or identity. So we think of interest fairly broadly. And then the other sphere that we're trying to integrate into learning is the social side. So peer culture, the fact that you're not just like sitting by yourself, pursuing something, but you actually have a community of peers and mentors who share that interest, who traffic in the products that you might produce, who share expertise, and that's where you see in the littleBits cycle that share dimension and remix dimension is incredibly important. And so with gaming culture, we see, you know, this sort of engine where kids are connecting specialized interests, often that have sort of a creative and tech component, with a really vibrant peer culture that traffics in knowledge and products of that work. Now, the part that is often missing is this third sphere, which is what we call the opportunity sphere. And by this, we really mean that those interests, you know, their peer engagements are being connected to academic learning, to civic engagement, to career opportunity, all of those things that will help young people find their place in the world as they grow older. And we, in our research, I'm an ethnographer, and I spend a lot of time hanging out with kids and playing games with them and understanding what they do on the internet. And there are lots of kids geeking out on interests with their friends on the internet, whether that's fandom or gaming or whatever. And they're learning a ton from doing that. But it's actually really rare for those learning dynamics, those peer cultures, those affinity networks to be connected to school, to workplaces, and so on. And that's where I think educators are such a critical bridging component to really say, look, kids are doing these amazing things, you know, having fun with their interests, you know, getting into specialized areas of expertise. How can we connect that to their academic learning? And that's really the crux of what we've been trying to achieve with the connected learning model. And I think tools like littleBits, which is really actively, you know, engaging with that social and interest-driven dimension of learning, but connecting it to career relevant skills in engineering and coding and so on, are such critical parts of this building this connected learning ecosystem. It really, like Ayah said, and you know, how littleBits thinks about engagement with educators, it's not that, you know, one group, you know, it's not like the tool's going to solve all the problems. It's not like the school can solve all the problems. It's not like the internet can solve all the problems, but it's really about building coalitions and alliances where we're mobilizing together around a shared vision of learning, but we all recognize that we have different roles to play in building this ecosystem that really diversifies young people's entry points into learning and opportunity. So I just wanted to share, you know, in the last bit I have of time here, just a few projects that are really, you know, part of this broader movement for connected learning. And I think of what littleBits is doing and the work on coding, the coding kit that littleBits is doing is, you know, part of this broader community that is, you know, I'm sure many of you as educators in this space have connected with this this orientation towards, you know, hands-on, social, project-based, and interest-driven learning. And you know, more and more we're seeing efforts to bring this orientation to learning to coding specifically. So I wanted to share some other, you know, researchers, some other platform developers that are doing work in this vein, because I know we'll be spending more time learning about the littleBits coding kit in the last half of this webinar. So as you know, one project that my research team has been collaborating with, you know, Mitch Resnick at the Lifelong Kindergarten at MIT that I mentioned, you know, they have the Scratch programming community and platform, which is, you know, very kid-friendly. And, you know, we've been working with them to design what they call micro worlds that are about building these sort of landing pages, these resources that really connect Scratch to diverse youth interests. So the first project we had was really about building sort of hip hop music and dance type content that could be repurposed and used within Scratch. And you know, working with librarians to really bring these into a workshop format where to meet kids where they're learning and accessing digital tools. And I'll just show a little bit of this video, which is an example of one of the products from this project. So I'll just give you a little teaser. You can find more on the Coding for All website. But again, it's just an effort to say, look, let's break down some of these stereotypes about what a coder looks like, what the products of coding look like, and how can, tool makers like the Scratch team and the littleBits community connect with these sort of diverse kinds of cultural reference. Another project and group that I think is doing really great work on inclusivity is the Digital Youth Network, and they have a program called Digital Youth Divas that is, looking at e-textiles and these other kinds of sort of hands-on sort of learning that is a little bit more culturally aligned with girl culture, and you can see how they, even in their design of the space, the colors they use, their aesthetics, and I really appreciate the littleBits aesthetic for being thoughtful about this kind of thing as well in fostering a spirit of inclusivity and connecting with young girls' interests in things like fashion to get them to take their first steps into coding. And then finally, I'll just mention a project that I started. It's a passion project of mine. It's a nonprofit that we started a couple years ago, which is really building on kids' interest in Minecraft, which you probably know is the most played game of all time. And, I was thinking about, in preparation for this webinar, because people often describe, Minecraft as Legos in a virtual world, but it's actually a lot like littleBits in a virtual world in the sense that there are, blocks that just enable you to build physical materials, but there are actually a lot of materials that are much more like the engineering blocks that you see in littleBits that allow kids to build circuits and design, complex kinds of mechanisms within a virtual world. And what we've done with Connected Camps is say, okay, look, kids are doing a ton of Minecraft. A lot of it is in that consumption mode, whether it's watching YouTube videos or, just playing survival mode or, PvP, but we have an opportunity to build on kids' natural interest with games like Minecraft, especially when they include a tool set that you can extract for engineering, much like littleBits does with their blocks. And, we also run coding programs that enable kids to, do, program turtles and so on within the virtual space. And, we bring in counselors who are Minecraft nerds who teach the online camps and after school programs. So it's all, within this family of a set of approaches that are saying, look, the skills like coding are, most kids are not motivated to learn skills just for the sake of learning skills. But if they're connected to, meaningful purpose, culture, community, shared interests, social life, meaningful projects, then suddenly, like Ayah said, the motivational structure for how kids engage shifts dramatically. And I think this new foray that littleBits is making into coding is a really great example about this broader shift in how people are thinking of introducing kids to coding. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. That was so informative. And I can't stress enough to everybody to check out connectedcamps.com. We've seen in particular that coding got started outside of the classroom in after school activities, in clubs, in recess activities, like mentioned, and Connected Camps is a great way to continue a lot of the learning that's going on in the classroom, hopefully. So I'm now going to pass it over to Allyssa. Allyssa is a media library specialist in Texas and can sort of give us a bit of a boots on the ground perspective. So Allyssa, I'm passing it over to you.
All right, great. Thank you so much. I am opening up my screen. Can you see my screen? Are we good?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my name is Allyssa Loya, and I am a librarian in Rockwall ISD. I work with kinder through 6th grade students, and I'm just going to talk a little bit today about how coding came about in the library, how I make it work, and how it kind of pops out of makerspace, and how it all ties into the 4 C's, into 21st century skills that I really believe are powerful for students to know. So it all started with a little makerspace. I think a lot of us, especially in the library, are really interested in doing makerspaces. They've been around for a while. A lot of us have already implemented them. And I started doing Maker Mondays, where I closed down the library and only let kids come in to do makerspace. So during study hall time, 4 or 5 kids from each class would come in and build. And it was just an amazing way to see them think and create and explore in the library, to really see them take ownership of creating things and of thinking critically. The makerspace is such a wonderful place for that. And, you know, I really saw them get so excited about learning, so excited about taking initiative. You know, I feel like when kids are in a classroom, if they get things wrong over and over and over again, they kind of don't want to try it anymore. But when it comes to things like making and coding, they're so excited and they're so invested that even if they try 10 times and get it wrong, they want to keep trying because they want to learn and they want to feel that kind of success and pride in inventing and creating and seeing that come to fruition. So coding came to the forefront when I was looking around and thinking to myself, you know, what should I do next? And I noticed that I was really leaning towards the technical side of makerspaces, and I didn't want to take makerspace away because it offered such a nice variety to students. But I also felt like coding and the skills that come with it were just so important for the kids. So what I decided to do was I decided to start an extra club along with Makerspace. We decided to do a coding club, and I approached our instructional technologist, who's amazing, and said that this is my idea, and I didn't want to do before or after school because I didn't want it to be available only to kids who could get rides. I do work at a Title I school. A lot of students ride the bus, and a lot of students really depend on eating breakfast, so they wouldn't be able to come in the mornings. And the spot we decided on was lunchtime. And so what the students would do would come during lunch for 4-week sessions, and we would work on different coding activities with them. If you can see in the background, I had to blur it out because of kids' faces, but Tuesdays are when we do it, and Tuesdays are always taco days or Frito pie days without fail, which is a challenge in itself because those are the messiest days and the strongest smell days. But the kids felt so excited to get picked to be the ones that were chosen to learn these skills and to really be able to try things that they had never done before. And it's just been an amazing experience. And I did start out the coding club thinking, I need to teach the kids how to code. I need the kids to know this skill. It's an important skill to have. But as I was looking around, I really realized that the kids were getting so much more out of it than just learning the skills of coding. I read a quote one time that said, we don't expect every kid who we teach to write to become an author. We teach them to write because it's an important skill and you learn. And I think that the same thing goes with coding. Every kid that we teach coding is not going to go out and be a programmer, but the skills that they get out of it are so important. And the more I do it, the more I realize that, the kids don't even realize they're acquiring them, but these are valuable lifelong skills, especially in the 21st century and as 21st century learners. And, these kids are going to grow up and be participants in our society. And if they're going to be successful, they need to know how to do things. The 4 C's, when we talk about the 4 C's with coding, the first one is collaboration. When I see kids and they come into the library and they're working on coding, they kind of don't want to work together at the beginning. They all want to take these new cool projects and these new cool programs and this cool technology pieces, and they want to work on it by themselves and they don't really want to share. But as the problems get harder and as they realize that, hey, what I'm doing may not work 100%, they have to start working with each other to figure it out. And instead of a selfish thing, it becomes a group community thing. And the students learn not only that working together is important, but how to work together effectively. And then how to celebrate afterwards, to say, hey, we figured out this problem, we figured it out together. And that's such an important skill for them to have continuing on in their life. And to go along with that, we also have communication. Again, when we start off, the kids don't really know how to talk to each other about solving problems because it's not something that they get to do very often when it comes to problems that they're invested in. So having those communication skills are something that they build while they're in the coding club. You know, at first they get really frustrated. The first couple weeks that they're in the coding club, they get frustrated with each other, and there's a lot of finger pointing and blaming. So at the beginning, instead of hearing, how can we fix that, we hear a lot of, it's your fault, you did it wrong, that's why it didn't work. But the students, after they collaborate and learn that skill, while they're doing that, they learn that if they communicate effectively, if they say things like, where did we go wrong? Or how should we fix this? Or what do you guys think? As they learn how to do those things and they learn how to communicate correctly, they're building those skills and they're understanding not just how to talk to people about coding, but to how to talk to people in general, you know, in life. When they go out and become adults and get jobs, they're going to have to know that if there is any kind of problem out there that needs to be responded to, how do I talk to a person about that? How do I shape my ideas and form my words in a way that makes sense, that is positive, and that, you know, eventually solves our problem? We also see a lot of critical thinking, and this personally is my favorite part of coding, and my favorite thing that students get out of coding is that students have to think hard. They really have to stop and think. You know, when I work with kindergartners and when I work with first graders, I see that there are a lot of kids who don't, I'm sorry, I'm hearing music in the background. Is that me? Okay. When my little kids come in, when kinder and first and second are coming in and doing just basic directional coding, just step-by-step information, you know, how do I get from point A to point B, when they're just thinking of the basic coding, they really have to think, do I want to go forward or do I want to go backwards? If I'm facing this way, am I facing left or right? If it doesn't work, where did I go wrong? And a lot of times, you know, critical thinking, if it's too hard, kids kind of want to give up and they don't want to keep trying. But when it's things like this, it's things like they're interested in. So I've had the pleasure of working with the new littleBits code, and I see the same thing. Sometimes it's out of a kid's comfort zone. Sometimes it's a little bit over their head, but because it's something that is so interesting, and because it's something that they are so invested in, they're willing to do that extra critical thinking. My older kids who are like in 5th and 6th grade and who are actually typing out lines of codes for the Arduinos, you know, they really have to think, okay, how do I have to build the breadboard? How do I have to build the Arduino in order to make it work? The inputs, the outputs, the resistors. How do I write my lines of code? If I get something wrong, the whole thing won't work. So how do I make sure I put it in order in the way that it works? So much critical thinking has come out of that. And that's a skill that can be applied to any of their classes, any of their subjects, and in their lives in general. And the last one is creativity. I feel like sometimes when we think about coding, we don't think about creativity, really. You know I didn't. When I got started, I thought that coding was just going to be a lot of directions and a lot of, you know, this, and this equals what I need to do. But it's become so much more. There's so many tools out there that we've been using. And especially with the littleBits, they've done such a great job creating these inventions that really get kids' minds going, that really encourage kids to take the pieces and to run with it. You know, this picture right here, it was a little girl, and in class she was learning how to do non-standard units of measure. And I was just going to pick like a stuffed animal to measure herself with or something, but she noticed one of my tools on the side and she said, "What is that?" And I explained it to her. And she was like, "Oh my goodness, can I measure myself with that?" And I said, "Sure, but how would we even do that?" And she had to think and get creative and figure out, you know, how can I measure myself using this coding tool? And so she ended up drawing an outline of herself, or we traced it and she finished it. And then she ended up coding something to measure how long or how tall she is, which is an amazing use for it. There's so many different ways that kids, it gets their brains thinking. You know, when we work with Arduino and breadboard, I just started with a basic light, but within a day of teaching those kids how to code that basic light, they were already coming up with inventions and asking questions and wondering. And that's an amazing thing. That creative spark leads to wonder in kids' lives, and to be able to provide them with that opportunity in the library and in school in general, I feel like is really important. And so just to finish up, this is what drives me. It really is. This is my firm belief, and it kind of leads everything that I do when it comes to coding. I really, really believe that what a student learns while coding has the ability to change the trajectory of his or her life. You know, working in a Title I school, my kids don't get hands-on with technology like this a lot. They don't get those opportunities. And so I feel like it could change the trajectory of a kid's life, opening up job possibilities that they had never thought of before in the technology industry. But I also believe that it builds self-confidence. It shows them how to be efficient. It shows them how to collaborate and to communicate. It gives them all these skills that encourage them to believe in themselves and to be a valuable player in the school community and in the community at large. So I have such a passion for teaching kids coding and for making that opportunity available to them. And I think that littleBits has done a great job creating this kit to fit right into that space. And I hope that you guys are kind of encouraged to continue what you're doing if you've already started it, or to start if you're thinking about it. So thank you very much.
Lisa, thank you. That was fascinating, and I really loved hearing some of the real life examples that that you faced. We have time for a couple questions here, and then to remind all of you who are on, we will be doing a drawing for one of the code kits that we have to give away. And if you're able to stay on, please do, because we have a great deep dive session into the code kit immediately following this. So I have a coworker here. When we talk about play and learning, she often says, sometimes people think of it as chocolate-covered broccoli, that the play is kind of masking the learning, and it's not all that integrated. It's not that essential to the learning. And Mimi, let's just start with you. What kind of crystallize this for us? What is the role of play as a framework for all learning, but not just that, but integrating into coding and the 4 Cs?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think the chocolate-covered broccoli metaphor works well because it's so vivid, right, and memorable. But I think a lot of what happens, and we see this in discussions of connected learning a lot, is that when educators are trying to connect with young people's out-of-school interests, a lot of times that what happens is the importation of the genre, sort of the style and genre, rather than the underlying sort of social connection, the problem solving, and so on. So, it's really common, like in some approaches to gamification, for example, where you make it look like a game, and then you add some sort of features of, points and leaderboards and things like that. But when you look at the underlying kind of problem solving and social engagement, it doesn't look like what kids experience in game communities. So when we often use the word sort of playful learning or game based learning, rather than, say, gamification or some other terms, to really stress those uses of playful learning that really are about that spirit of hands-on experimentation, play, social sharing that we see in gaming communities. So I think it's important to just underline the fact that when we talk about games and learning, there's lots of different approaches. It's just as diverse as any other pedagogical area. You can have approaches in game-based learning that are more direct instruction, and you can have approaches that are more progressive and hands-on. And I think what the folks in connected learning and what littleBits is trying to accomplish here is much more on the progressive student-centered approach to games and learning.
Thank you for that, for the compliment, but also for the very thoughtful answer. We have just a minute left, and there was one very specific question that an audience member asked, and I'd love to get this to Allyssa. Somebody mentioned the concept of frustration, and you spoke about this a lot, that if a student gets frustrated, it can sometimes be a barrier to doing more, to going further. Do you try to avoid the frustration, or how do you overcome the frustration, or is the frustration part of the process?
That's a great question. And for both my makerspace and for coding, I think frustration is part of the process. And I really kind of force the kids to face that frustration head on. When the kids come in and choose a spot that they're going to work at, you know, if I have different stations available, I do not let them move. If they start and they are like, nope, it's too hard, I don't let them move. I say, you picked what you picked and you have to work through it, because I feel like that's also a really important skill, that grit and perseverance and being able to stop and think clearly. Because I talk about kids being consumers, we forget that because they're so used to being consumers, they're used to getting that automatic gratification. And so coding and teaching them coding and how to be creative and making things is also getting them out of that mindset, is also getting them into a mindset of, you know, I'm going to stick this out because it's worth it. And so I don't try to avoid it. And, you know, it's good for me too as an educator to be able to sit down and build that relationship with the kids and help them work through it.
Thank you so much. We are unfortunately out of time for this first session, but we have a whole nother session coming right after this. But before we do have a code kit to give away. So drum roll, please. Out of the attendees who are here, the winner is Sharon Dressel. So Sharon, we will be reaching out to you shortly after this is all over to get your address and get this sent out to you. But stick around, everybody. We have one more code kit to give away at the very end. Thank you so much to Mimi, to Ayah, to Allyssa. Check out connectedcampus.com, visit littlebits.cc/codekit, and we are going to move on to the second part of the program, really introducing the code kit. I'm so grateful to have another wonderful set of panelists here for you guys today. We're going to be talking with Dave Sharp. He is the design lead on the code kit. We will be talking with Kate Rosenblum. She is a member of our Educator Advisory Council and helped design one of the lessons and activities. We will also be hearing from Sandra Wiseman, who is a librarian and tech integration specialist at Woodsdale Elementary School. And we will also be hearing from Christian Agbo, who is the executive director of the Montclair Learning Center in North Caldwell, New Jersey. They've got some great stuff to share with you. They've been hands-on with this. They've been in the trenches for a while, so to speak. And a lot of you have been asking some very specific questions about the code kit, and they will be able to answer a lot of those. So with that, I am going to pass the presentation over to Dave Sharp, who will start us off. As a reminder, he was the lead designer on the code kit, and lots of good stuff in the works. Dave, take it away.
All right. Just to double check that you can see me in the presentation.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Great. So we're going to dive into the code kit, look a little bit about the specifics of the bits, the content, and the support materials that we created during this. Starting, oh, I'm sorry, I'm having one little problem with this. I'm back. All right. So starting just with a very quick overview, littleBits Code Kit is a combination of working with block programming and bits. The content that we've generated that comes along with this kit is really targeted between 3rd and 8th grade, although we've tested in high schools and seen fantastic results with high school students. We just don't have as much content for that age range. It serves between 1 and 3 students. We've seen sort of 3 as the most successful group size, sort of the largest group size working with this kit. Comes with 10 lessons. There are over 100 different kinds of activities in the kit, and there are 16 bits and 30 accessories. So let's dive a little deeper into it. To start with, what's the big idea? Universal to every littleBits kit that we make is to inspire kids to be more curious and confident and inventive. And what we really were looking to achieve specifically with this kit is empower them with a new tool to explore with, coding. So a new tool to explore the process of invention, to explore sort of themselves and their place in the world and how they can have an impact in it. Big idea here is essentially you build a circuit in real life with your bits. You use the coding app software on your computer to create code in order to create fun DIY games. And so just to look a little deeper at what this looks like, this is one of the inventions in the kit. It's the Ultimate Shootout, which is sort of a sort of tabletop soccer game. And then on the right, you'll see the code that generates the soccer game. So this is block programming. It's very similar to Scratch. It's based off of Google's Blockly, which is also what powers the Kano computing kits, Dashdot, and a lot of similar platforms. I think one of the really important things to note here with block programming is that it really lets kids focus on the sort of core coding concepts of loops and conditionals and variables that are really going to be almost universal across the coding experience, no matter what language they're working on. And so this really is about laying down these foundational concepts. So what are kids going to learn? It's the big picture is it's a combination of engineering design and computer science or computational thinking. With the creation of the STEAM student set, we really sort of laid the foundation for how littleBits and the invention cycle that you heard about earlier connects with the engineering design process. In particular, made connections to the next generation science standards, has a sort of cross-cutting concepts for engineering design, which are really meant to be present in all of the science areas that you investigate. And so that sort of spotlight on the process and thinking about how you engineer something, how you solve a problem by building, is still very core to this kit. But what we've added to it is the element of computer science and computational thinking. So linking here to the Computer Science Teachers Association, which has a set of standards on computer science and computational thinking, but also took a lot of inspiration from both the Harvard Graduate School of Education and MIT's Lifelong Kindergarten. And sort of that partnership of those two institutions is really an educational foundation for Scratch, and really is about looking at not particulars of specific coding language or particulars of hardware, but is really about these big ideas in computational thinking, about coding and computing as a way of thinking and a way of solving problems and a way of seeing the world. So how are kids going to learn these sort of big, important concepts? And as Ayah and Mimi and the others have said, it really starts by inventing games, because that's sort of how the pull and need to know behind games is really something that drives them to go a lot deeper into the coding experience. And it starts with Hello World. So Hello World has been a tradition in the coding world since the 70s. Whenever you learn a new language, you always start by having your program say Hello World. And so we really wanted to make sure kids knew that they were about to be a part of a tradition that's been around for decades in learning to program. It comes with it's all guided within the coding app, and it comes with a really great video that plays forward that outlines sort of basic ideas in coding and computing, drawing comparisons between bits and parts of your body, and so some really wonderful animations to bring these ideas to life. After that, one of the things that we noticed when we were talking with a lot of classrooms around the area is that there's a big difference between you can have a third grader who's been doing Scratch for years and has a lot of sort of coding fundamentals under their belt, but you can also have an eighth grader who's never encountered any coding before. So it's not really about grade level as much as it is sort of like their familiarity and exposure to coding concepts. And so we wanted to create sort of a path within this experience that's going to lay these foundational principles down, and sort of give them a place to dive in and understand the core coding concepts, so that when it comes time to really build the games, they're armed with the tools. And so there are 12 coding tutorials in the app that cover 5 different areas. So we've got loops, inputs and outputs, variables, logic, and functions. And each one of these starts with a video that outlines the basic coding concept. And then there are a series of tutorials that kids can go through that sort of highlight how these coding concepts are used. And rather than it just being a tutorial about, oh, you're going to learn about loops, each one of these really ties to an important area, and sort of ties to something that we know that kids want to be able to achieve when building these games. And so loops is an opportunity to learn about how you can create animations and sound effects in your game. Learning about inputs and outputs is an opportunity to learn how you can create really sort of inventive and awesome controllers and different ways to operate your game, how you can use the hardware to create different interactions like sound effects and animations, and how something like logic pertains to how you generate the rules of a game and add new rules to your game. So we really wanted to make sure that they saw each of these coding concepts as a really concrete way to achieve something they want to be able to build. Then there also are the 4 core inventions. There's tug of war, ultimate shootout, hot potato of doom, and the rockstar guitar. And I had talked a little bit about the invention cycle earlier, and I just want to reiterate that here, that we really see each one of these inventions that's in the app as a seed. And it's not about the kid building the circuit, pressing load, and then they've done it. They've built hot potato. It's really about where they take it next. And so whenever we're testing these inventions in a classroom, testing these games in a classroom, we always are looking for how quickly the kids come up with all of the changes and improvements they want to make. So Ultimate Shootout, for example, is a really simple game in that you flick a soccer ball into the goal, that cardboard flap pushes a button, and the number on the screen goes up, so you're like a scoreboard. But almost instantly, kids are saying, but I want to have sound effects, or I want to have a timer, because a real game has a timer. You can't just play forever. Or I want to have multiple players. And so really looking for making sure that each one of these, that they're going to sort of be propelled to dig further into a coding concept. So that if they want to add sound effects, they're going to need to learn a little bit more about loops. If they want to add a second player, they're going to need to learn about variables. And so it's really about sort of what happens after that first create and play, and that remix is where they're really going to dive into these coding concepts and take each one of these inventions in a direction that really matters to them. So what's included in the kit? In addition to the bits and accessories, there's a quick start guide for educators, which sort of points you in the right direction for downloading all your resources, and we'll go over those resources in a second. There's a quick start guide for students. One of the things that's important to us with all of these kits is that it is sort of it is equally well suited to a classroom environment that's led by a teacher going through sort of a set lesson, but it's also something that can live on the shelf in the library or in the makerspace, that can be used for extra time at the end of a lesson, and that the content inside really speaks directly to the students. So it's something that they have an opportunity to explore and invent with on their own. There is also a poster that goes over bit basics and has an overview of the invention cycle. And then finally the bit index, which I'll dive into a little bit. I'll dive into a little bit more in a second. In terms of the bits, I just wanted to highlight 4 bits and accessories that play a really key role in this kit. The first is the code bit. That's sort of the brains of the operation, and that's where your code lives. It has a wireless connection over BLE, but that also can be hooked up by a USB cable. The LED matrix and the speaker are really the two heroes of this kit. And one of the things that we really saw when we were just starting out this kit design process is there were a few other sort of combining coding with hardware offerings out there, and they all skewed towards making the vehicle drive forward, turn left, turn right. They all tended to be very targeted towards boys and sort of had a very narrow focus about what it meant to combine coding with hardware, what it meant to make coding physical in the real world. And with the LED matrix and the speaker, we're really opening up a new area for them to explore this relationship. And it now can become about creating games, but also creating animations and scrolling text and telling stories, creating sound effects, music, musical instruments. And so it's a much broader, more open area for these kids to explore. There's much wider walls and a lot more spaces for kids to find their place in coding and inventing. And last but not least is the rechargeable USB battery. This one we've been hearing from educators a lot about in terms of really not having to keep the supply of 9 volts always on hand. And so we're really excited to offer this one. So the rechargeable USB battery, so that you'll always have power for your circuit. And low power will never stop your lesson. The next big element is the CodeKit app. So this is really the vehicle for kids to explore with, and it's what delivers most of the content from this app. It's available for Windows, Chromebooks, and Mac. And it is, you see here sort of on the right is sort of the basics. That's what we call the coding canvas. Sort of all of your coding blocks menu is on your left. You have a big space to work with. And on the right is where we can deliver step-by-step guides for the tutorials, deliver videos that show them the inventions in action and how to build it. Also tons of sort of remix tips and prompts as a way to sort of spark that process of saying, okay, I've built the ultimate shootout or the hot potato of doom, but where can I take it next? The bit index, which I talked about earlier, this is a booklet that comes with the kit, and it sort of dives into a little bit of detail, each one of the bits in the kit. So it tells you about the bit, how it works, explains the features, gives you some real world analogies, because one of the things about littleBits is that, these little sort of nuggets of electronics represent electronics and functions which are everywhere around us in the world. And so buttons and light sensors and temperature sensors and servo motors are all things that are around us in different places. And so we really want to draw those sort of connections so that they begin to see that what they're working with really represents a building block for things that they recognize around them in the world. And then finally, each bit comes with a mini challenge. So it's a quick little sort of 5-minute exploration, a prompt as a way to get to know the bit. So now I want to dive a little bit into the Educator site. So really excited about this element of the kit. With the STEAM student set, we had a PDF teacher's guide that had all of the lessons and sort of outlined how you could use the kit in a classroom. And in this, with this kit, we've leveled that up with an Educator microsite. So on the very first page, there's an intro from Ayah. There are sort of a meet your kit video where we go through all of the different components that are in the kit and introduce them. There is your first lesson, which introduces, sort of walks teachers through the first lesson and gives them a sense of what teaching with the code kit looks like in the classroom, provides sort of tips and hints for how to prepare for your first lesson. And then finally, a quick video about the invention cycle. The other thing I want to just say about the creation of the Educator resources site is that we had a really fantastic group of 12 educators in the New York City area that formed an Educator Advisory Council. And they were from public schools and private schools and after school organizations like Girls Who Code. They ranged from 3rd grade all the way up through high school. And we met with them once a month to get feedback and sort of talk things out with them. Also went to their classrooms, visited their classrooms to test things out with their kids. And they really provided a lot of the insights that you'll see inside this Educator Resources site. I mean, this was a kit that was really sort of co-designed with educators. So their other part is the teacher's tools. So plenty of checklists and curriculum guides so that you sort of to make the connection to standards if that's an important area for you. Curriculum guide really walks through how, creates a path through the content, shows you the different ways that you can use the lessons, sort of different units that you can put together depending on the experience level of your students. And then the implementation checklist is just sort of a handy sort of step-by-step for how to make sure you've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's of getting software installed and talking to the IT department. All the lessons that come with CodeKit are also in Google Docs. And so something that we had noticed in creating before we created this kit was that a lot of teachers were taking the content and importing it into Google Docs so that they could customize it and so that they could share it with their colleagues. And so we decided to put it in Google Docs from the very beginning because, educators are an extremely inventive group and really wanted to give them as much as a platform to be able to customize and take the bits and pieces that we've provided in these resources and recombine them in different ways that are going to be useful for them. Because no classroom is the same. And so it really is, the ability to customize can be hugely important. And then last but not least, there's just a collection of handouts, debugging checklists, workbooks, just different tools that you can use with your students, really helpful things for assessment, but also just for making sure that cleanup goes smoothly and that students can provide sort of feedback to each other in a meaningful manner. So there is a ton of stuff in that Educator's website and a ton of great content in the app. Really excited to offer it to you guys and really excited to start seeing the kit alive and out there in classrooms around the world.
Dave, thank you so much. That was fascinating. And as somebody who works for littleBits, I can tell you there's a whole lot more on the website. It's just launched today. We're extremely excited about it. It really, I think, is taking littleBits education to the next level, but really it's about what you and your students can do and take it to the next level there. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Kate Rosenblum. She is a member of our Educator Advisory Council. She helped develop one of the lessons specifically and has a background in learning education design. So I am going to get her queued up here and she will take it away.
Okay, thank you so much. This is Kate, and I'm really happy to be speaking with you today. I was, as Dave mentioned, the Educator Advisory Panel, and I was a member of that Educator Advisory Panel. So Dave, thank you for the flattering words about our contributions. And they really did work with us really closely to get our insights. It didn't seem, like they were trying to have us confirm what they wanted to do. They really took to heart all the things that we had to say as educators. So I think that it really lent itself to a really awesome tool for our classrooms. I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenge or curriculum that I helped design to go along with this kit. We're actually, I guess, starting from the end because the one that I worked on is the boss level challenge in which students are using the code kit well, they're using all the sort of skills that they learned along the way about programming and engineering design, and they're putting it all together to design original games that also can address some sort of community need. So that's why I've called my presentation here, Create Change with littleBits Code Kit. I'll start out giving you just a really small background about me. I have been a youth educator in after school and alternative education spaces since 2004. I'm currently the learning design manager at Mouse. We are a nationwide nonprofit curriculum provider that, oh, sorry, I'm hearing a bad echo. We provide curriculum on technology and maker education for learning spaces across the country. And we also concentrate on using technology to sort of empower students to make change in their world. So that's what I currently do. But I started out, actually, I was a film major in college, and I started out working in media education and media literacy programs when I was an undergrad. And I both taught and wrote curriculum for a number of film organizations. And then I sort of became interested in teaching media literacy to girls and young women, and I was doing that for a while. And then while I was teaching youth, I was working at a program where I was teaching youth to use iMovie in grad school, and that's when I really became interested in teaching technology and maker education. And so I began as the curriculum manager at Mouse in 2012. And I've been working on increasing access to quality technology and maker education for underserved youth ever since then. These are a couple examples of things that I've worked on. There's some web literacy curriculum that's actually part of a open educational resources that are available through Mozilla in their web literacy program. And also just a program that's through Mouse about making electricity as part of our green tech program. I also serve as a representative of Mouse for Hive NYC, which is a collection of youth serving organizations across New York City that focus on digital and media education. And we sort of get together to talk about best practices and to help connect kids to various programs across the city. There's one in New York City, and they have similar ones in Toronto, Pittsburgh, and Chicago. I think that there might be a couple more, but those are the big ones. And then, as I mentioned, I served also on the Educator advisory team for the development of the code kit, and it was really fun. And I got to play test a lot of this stuff before it came out. So during this sort of 13-year educator journey that I've been on, I feel like I've seen a lot of fads kind of come and go, like virtual worlds. I remember when Second Life was the future of education. You don't hear much about that anymore. But there are a few things that I've seen consistently kind of create really amazing and effective learning experiences over and over, and they seem to never get old. So that is kind of what I try to infuse into my curriculum. A lot of this is going to be, I'm sure, very similar to what Mimi said, because Mimi is definitely a big influence on my work and on Mouse's work. So it was really awesome to hear from her today. But first of all, project-based is really important. I can remember being in middle school and high school and having, facts recited to me by a teacher, or, working out of a workbook and thinking, when will I ever need to know this? Why is this useful? But project-based learning helps kind of get rid of that, why do I need to know this? Because it allows students to see the end goal of their learning. They know they're working toward something and that they're going to have to build up knowledge in order to achieve that sort of end goal, that end project. Projects also tend to be really collaborative, which is an awesome life skill to learn along the way for young people. And these projects often, they're fun, but they're also best when they're grounded in real world situations. And when students are really given freedom and space to explore different ways that they can sort of create this project. This is a picture of one of the Mouse students. We have a program where they spend a year designing and prototyping assistive and adaptive technology for people with disabilities. So this is invention that students created to help wheelchair users get over the gap between the subway platform and the train. The second thing that's really important for creating awesome learning experiences, in my view, is constructionist learning, which is the idea that students construct their own knowledge by exploration and tinkering and iteration and hands-on making of stuff. You know, it involves posing a problem or a challenge to a group of students and then asking them to try to solve it with a little bit of guidance, but not giving them all of the answers along the way. It's definitely a much longer process, and it's not as easy as, you know, giving out answers, but the learning is much deeper. And then besides learning the sort of subject matter that you want them to learn, they're also learning how to problem solve, how to find answers to questions, how to find them on their own, how to persevere in the face of challenges. And they kind of learn how to scaffold their own learning. So they sort of are like, okay, I know I need to get here, but what do I need to know in order to get from point A to point C, you know? So here we have students learning about electricity production. They're testing a little turbine that they made, and they put it in front of a fan, and they were testing different ways to see how many amps of electricity that they could create with their turbines, and along the way learning about the process of electricity production. And finally, I think that learning should be fun. You know, our kids love emoji, and they love manga, and they love animated GIFs. And so we incorporate these things, and I try to incorporate these things into learning experiences, along with games and active learning. I think that education and learning doesn't have to take itself so seriously all the time. You know, playing games in order to, like this example is we made an obstacle course to help teach kids the process of how the internet works, right? When you put out a request and then the packet goes out and how it goes to a server and comes back. And we get silly, and I like to help the kids get silly, because learning does not have to be dry, and you know, it doesn't have to be boring, and it doesn't have to be that chocolate covered broccoli either that we were talking about before. It can be that we're just playing a game, and along the way you happen to be learning things, and maybe you don't even realize that you're learning it. But it also makes it really memorable, and it makes it so that the classroom, when it's kind of silly and fun, it's like a safer space for students to be silly and to mess up and to fail. You know, this isn't a place where they're really putting themselves at risk when they don't give the right answer or when they don't know the answer. You know, plus it's just really engaging to wear giant hats and to walk around an obstacle course to learn about how a packet gets sent through the internet. So with all those things in mind, I worked with littleBits to create the Change the World arcade, which, as I mentioned, is the boss level challenge that comes with the kit. And in it, it's the sort of culmination of all the things they've learned along the way. And students are asked to take those things that they've learned and to apply it to the design of a game that will address some kind of real world issue. So they might, you know, research about recycling and the problem with, you know, plastic waste, and then design a game that encourages recycling in their school. Or maybe they live in an urban area that doesn't have a lot of outdoor play space, so they design a game that can be played in a small space indoors, because, you know, and they research why play is important and having room to play is important. And it incorporates those three principles that I've talked about. It's project-based. They know they need to come up in groups with these games that address you know, a real world issue, but they get to sort of experiment and play with it along the way, and then design something that's fun, but that's also meaningful to their community. It's constructionist in that, you know, they collaborate to build something and construct their own knowledge along the way. You know, there's not a facilitator there telling them what the problem is that they're going to address and giving them all the facts about it and then telling them how they can build something to address that. They're sort of given some guidance, but then they explore along the way to figure out a solution. And then they also, you know, do user testing with their peers to see what could make it more fun and whether it works or not. And then finally, it's fun because they're making games, and what is more fun than games? There's some bonus things that go along with it, which is in the end, they all get together and present their games to the community as an arcade, a game arcade, and they invite their peers and, you know, parents and friends and things in to come play all the games in this arcade, and it really gives them a chance to not just show off what they've built and learned, but to see themselves as leaders. I find that, you know, when students are presenting to adults or other peers, it can be nerve-wracking at first, but they really start seeing themselves as leaders in the field, and you know, people who are in possession of knowledge that other people don't have, and it feels really powerful. And then the other great thing about the challenge is that it's really cross-disciplinary. I mean, they're learning all these things in one, or learning and practicing all these things in one activity. They're doing the programming and the engineering. They're learning a little bit about internet research and community engagement and presentation skills. They're learning empathy when they are thinking about these problems in their communities and people who need to deal with them. And they learn persistence because they aren't given the solution. And so they are going to fail a few times, and they have to, in order to have something to present at the end, they need to keep going back and fixing it, taking in constructive criticism from their peers, and learning to make it better and to keep going until they've really reached the best solution possible. So that is kind of the gist of me and my contribution to the Code Kit. So thank you.
Thank you, Kate. As a reminder, everybody, Kate was a member of our Education Advisory Council, as Dave mentioned, who really helped us play test this, really gave us some amazing feedback, and really assisted in the design of this kit. But in addition to the Education Advisory Council, we also had a lead educators program that we kicked off in March. We had 17 educators from all over the country who had applied, were accepted. We sent them code kits that were pretty, I'll admit, in rough shape. We didn't have all the content ready. We just had some bits in the box, and we sent them to these educators to start playing with their students, particularly in areas that we weren't there with clipboards watching. They were, it was really organic, and they helped us catch bugs and B, create a lot of content, and also just also a lot of great feedback that we were incorporating into the kit as we approach launch day. So our next two panelists that you're going to hear from are part of that cohort. So I'm going to pass it to Sandra Wiseman. She is a library media specialist in West Virginia. So Sandra, I'm passing it off to you. You should be ready to go.
All right, are you seeing my slides?
Yes, we are.
All right. Well, like she said, I'm Sandy Wiseman from Woodsdale Elementary School. My school is a pre-K through 5th grade building, and we have about 500 students. And I really want to be a cheerleader for this kit. I have just finished my 33rd year of teaching, and coding was not something that was in my curriculum when I was in school. So if I can make this kit work with my kids, I am confident that you can too, because there's a lot of supports and things built into the kit to make everybody successful. Now, my first experience with littleBits came a couple of years ago when we got a grant from a local electric company to bring some electricity and circuit training to our kids. And we got some of the basic littleBit kits and some motors and some LED lights. And the project was to have the kids build electrified book characters. And it was so successful. The kids were excited. They ended up with great projects, and they gained a real understanding of how circuits and electricity work. Here are some of the things they created. Here's R2-D2. He swiveled and one of his eyes lit up. That's Pete the cat on the table there with glowing green eyes. And then the final one to share with that is the gingerbread boy, and his head rotated all the way around. So when I got the opportunity to work with littleBits on this new kit, I was really excited because I knew what my kids did with the basic kits, and this kit just takes things to a whole new level. You are building something, and then you're actually controlling it with the code that you're writing. So when the kit is inviting, it's colorful, it's colors that the kids like, it's well organized, and when you open it, it can be a little overwhelming when you see all those pieces like the LED screen and the push buttons and those things, but the documentation is helps you with that. And being a librarian, I always start with the booklets, the quick start guides for the kids and for the teacher. They're quick and easy to read. They'll get you up and running in no time at all. Probably the most important of the booklets is the bit index that explains everything that's in the kit, and the many challenges that it includes are great. So my next thing with the kit was to build all of the inventions myself. I wanted to figure out what could go wrong. I wanted to see what I thought my kids would struggle with. Like they said before, there's Hello World, where you get the LED screen to say Hello World. The Ultimate Shootout, which is a goal game. Hot Potato of Doom, where you actually pass around this gridded structure, and of course you don't want to be holding it when the buzzer goes off. There's Rockstar Guitar, where you're actually making a guitar that'll make sound. And then the final one in the kit is Tug of War. Like I said, I was troubleshooting so that I was familiar with the kit, but it was also a lot of fun to end up making all those games. Then I introduced it to my kids. The students I was working with are 5th graders. They are pretty good at coding. They were a robotics team, and they competed in the Wonder League robotics competition this year. They were willing to come in before school to try out the littleBits kits. And the first thing I did was just let them play with no instructions, no directions. I let them open the box. I already had the app loaded, because I always think if you give kids a chance to play with stuff first, then they're more likely to listen to you when you go on into instructions. Then I had the kids build each of the inventions, and what you're seeing here is one of their Ultimate Shootout. Now, even though we were all following the same directions, you can see that the kids use their own creativity to come up with little different variations of the games. The girls even took time to build a little framework around their shootout. The way I approached it was to show the videos that are included first. We did that as a whole group, and we sorted out the bits they would need, and then the kids started building, and they could watch on demand as they needed to put the kit together. Then after they had built all of the inventions that were included with the kit, I asked them to come up with their own ideas, maybe to try a new bit, to change the code in some way. Well, the girls were fascinated with the LED screen, so they opted to work with the Hot Potato game, and they changed the images that come up on the screen. as it's being passed, they also did not like the sound the buzzer made, and they changed it to something they thought was more pleasant. You can see their code, and like they said before, it's Blockly. So if your kids are doing code.org coding already, or if they're working with Scratch, this environment should feel very familiar to them. Now, my second team took the tug of war game and they turned it into a quiz game. So when the code is launched, a yes or no question will scroll across the screen, and you can see they've put stickers over the buttons. So if you think the correct answer is yes, you push the green sticker. If you think the correct answer is no, of course you push the red one. And if you get the question correct, a green check mark will appear on top of the question on the LED screen. And if you miss the question, you'll get a red X. And this is a screenshot of their code. And off to the right of the screen there, you can see where the video plays right on the coding screen where the kids are working if they need that support. This kit is a challenge. Like I said, these kids were 5th graders and they're pretty confident coders. But where they ran into their first frustration is if the game doesn't work exactly the way they wanted it to, now they have built something and they've written code. So they have to, when they're troubleshooting, they have to decide, is the trouble in the way that it's built and connected, or was the trouble in the code? So one of the things that littleBits provides is a troubleshooting guide, and that's a great place for the kids to start so they know where to start looking for any problems they have. And I'd just like to repeat what some of the other people have said, in that they are very willing to work through the problems. They have an idea, they want the game to work, so they were, whatever frustrations they ran into, they were very willing to work through to try to get it to work exactly the way they wanted it to. That's just another example of the troubleshooting. You can see the guide. We used netbooks, and for the most part, we worked with everything hardwired. We didn't work wirelessly with the netbooks. And then my final team reworked the tug of war game. They were reading Greek myths in their classroom, and they were fascinated with the myths. So they turned this into a Greek myth game. What you're seeing on their LED screen is a yellow sword and a blue sword. And to sword fight, you push the buttons that are included in the kit. And if the yellow sword wins, you get the thunderbolt for Zeus. And if the blue sword wins, you're getting the trident for Poseidon. And then this shows what their code looks like. They started out with the basic tug of war that was provided to them, and then they changed the screen. They wanted to add sound, but we ran out of time. And what you're seeing is the kids had about 4 hours with the kit. So they were able to build the original inventions and then make their own spin on it in about 4 hours. We were working before school, and it was the end of the school year, so they weren't totally centered some of the days we worked, but I think they did a great job. And all the groups were successful in their changes. And then you can see he's engaged. He's got the bits in his hand and looking at the screen, and he keeps testing what's going on. And my final tip is to provide lots of time to clean up because they don't want to quit working. They want to make everything perfect. They want the game to work. And these guys were so excited that when they got something to work, they wanted to carry it over to their classroom at recess time so they could share it with all their friends. So So like I said, I am not an experienced coder, and I was working with fifth graders, and we just had a great experience with the kit.
Sandy, thank you. That's really inspiring, and we love seeing pictures of kids engaged and excited. And in addition, the tips were very handy, and I like the one about lots of time for cleanup. I have to steal that for some tips that I give to educators. I'm going to pass it now to Christiane Agpo. She is, as a reminder, the executive director of the Montclair Learning Center in New Jersey, and she does a lot with girls who code and more after-school activities, and can't wait to hear what she has to share with us. So Christiane, I'm giving it over to you, and you should be all set to go.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. So I'm Christiane Agpo, and I run the Montclair Learning Center, where we offer STEM after-school summer camp and parties. We focus on really bringing in the girls into being engaged into STEM and be excited about coding. I'm an electrical engineer myself, so I really made it a mission to get the girls into STEM. So through girls only camps, and especially our Girls Who Code Club. The Code Kit was amazing, a great addition to our curriculum. The girls loved it, many different levels. As Mimi said, this kit seems to meet them where they are. We've given them the opportunity to be engaged, bringing their creativity, adding colors, music, and especially fun, and being able to share with their friends. So some of the girls saw the kit during a field trip at littleBits, and they were excited to share it with their friends. So when we got it, it was expectation and getting ready to go with the different inventions and created their own. So I'm sharing here a couple of pictures of some of the animations that the girls did, and they were really, really excited to be able to do their own thing, to be able to work with their teammate and come up with ideas, designing new animations and new games, be able to code them, and more importantly, be able to share and touch them and play with their friends. I have a video that hopefully is going to work that shows one of the girls and all the fun that they have. That gives you an idea of how fun it is to be with the girls. So what we really like about we're trying to teach the girl the engineering process, going from the design, coming up with an invention, then building the coding, building the actual circuitry, and then testing it, then having to go back to the design and sometimes tweaking it to where we want it to be. And this kit is perfect for that. We did an animation that I can show you. I'll show you this video. One of the tug of war. And oops, sorry. And a very short one. And they're designing their own tree that's growing. And Rainbow, there was a music, but I was so short you couldn't see it. We had about the same response where we introduced the 4 C's and some other programming languages like Python, for example. When we started with Python, the girls were not that excited, but as soon as we told them, oh, you can create your own music with Python, we're going to teach you how to code your music and code some animation, then they were super excited. And that's kind of the same response that we had with the Code Kit here. It wasn't just coding, but again, it was coding for something that we could share with our friends, something where we could add our own creativity, our own passion, some music, some animation, our stories, And so some of our students never did any coding. It was their first time. And a lot of our students are kind of dragged by their parents the first day, and they don't know what to expect. And they're pretty apprehensive, oh, it's going to be boring. I'm not sure if I'm going to like it. So our goal is really to get the girls excited about the different STEM activities like coding or building or going through the engineering process. And this tool has been great for us because we would show the student maybe a basic lesson, then they would just, oh, I'm going to do my own thing. And then they run with it. They just create their own inventions. They build their self-esteem. They're so proud of it. They share with their friends, with their parents. It goes on social media. And really seeing the spark in their eyes and seeing them excited about the Girls Who Code Club and wanting to come back is the best thing, because that's really our goal. And really having fun with the student that I will share with Educator, that's the best part. And I'm very excited about the launch today, because we're going to be able to bring that to bring the kid to our summer camp, not just to the Girls Club, but to a broader audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Christiane. It was really fun to see some of those animations, and it kind of drives home how creative you can be, and then giving them that access point to express their creativity, gets them interested in how to be able to do that, and that's where the coding comes in. We have about 5 minutes left, and thank you to all of you who stuck it out this far. I know it's been a lot to go over. There are some questions that we're probably not going to get to today, but we will follow up after this. But one question that we have, and Sandy, this will go to you. You mentioned at the very beginning, if I can do this, anybody can do this. Anybody can teach this. So in a nutshell, what would be your top tips to somebody who's never taught coding before, who maybe has this thrust on them as a, you must teach coding? What's the best way to get started?
When I started, I thought, I want my kids to take risks. So how can I ask them to take risks, like to step into coding, if I'm not willing to do that myself? So I started out, I started with code.org. And they start with, it's a free curriculum, all online, and it's step by step, and you are coding games, and it's just, it's actually fun to get the characters to do what's online. So I would go to some of the different things that are freely available to educators online and just start playing some of the games. And I will say that the lesson plans that are included in the kit are very easy to follow, whether you're a beginner or you're a more advanced coder.
That is a great takeaway, and I will double down on that, that if we want kids to take risks, if we want them to have a growth mindset, that we as educators also need to have a growth mindset and be willing to fail alongside students. Dave, I'm going to put this question to you, because we've gotten a bunch of questions that have to do with the configuration. So people are asking, how many kids can use the kit at once? What would a classroom configuration look like? So if you can talk a little bit more specifically about how you, from the product side, imagine this being integrated into a classroom, that'd be great.
Sorry about that, mute problem. In most of the testing that we've done and the experience working with kids, we found that between sort of 1 and 3 kids per kit is really sort of the best ratio. Once you get bigger than 3 kids, it can get a little bit crowded around the computer screen. So what we've seen in a lot of times with when teachers do want to either go sort of 3, 4, or 5, it can be really helpful to give kids specific roles and to sort of divide them up into sort of different workforces. And so some of the kids can focus on sort of the bit part of things, and so they'll really, their responsibility is the circuit and debugging and testing the circuit and how it works and thinking about what new bits to use. Another group of kids can be responsible for the code and sort of planning out the code and how that works. And then another group of kids can be sort of the materials engineers, and that they're responsible for the cardboard, the decoration, the mechanics, the wheels, how things move, and the motors and stuff like that. So that's one way that it can be helpful to work with larger groups. Another thing that we've seen that's worked really well in classrooms is to have a littleBits station, so that this coding activity can be part of sort of an assortment of different activities. And so that the littleBits in the code kit will be at one station. There could be other activities around the classroom, and kids sort of will move through each one of those stations. So it can be part of a larger classroom experience.
Well, guys, we are out of time. This was really interesting. Thank you for sticking it out. And as we close up, we do have one more code kit to give away. So the lucky winner of that code kit is going to be Alpha Cruz Lopez. So we will be in touch with you shortly after this. Thank you, everybody. Great engagement, great questions. We'll be following up afterward. Have a great afternoon.